Hello, my name's Lucy.
And I'm Becky, and we're part of a team of 11 Jubilee journalists who put together a very special radio show back in June to celebrate the Queen's Diamond Jubilee, as well as producing some pretty remarkable films based around fashion, royal memorabilia and the multicultural voice here in Norwich, all in relation to the Queen and the 2012 Jubilee celebrations. We'd all come from different backgrounds, with some of us quite familiar with the radio and film world, and others not quite so much. We assigned roles to every person, and very quickly people were working on putting together their reports, playing with ideas for the show, and going out to film. I can honestly say we were thrown in at the deep end with a microphone in front of us in the studio, but here's our documentary, showcasing our journey from start to finish as Jubilee journalist.
Whilst the producers and presenters worked on bringing the show together, some of the other Jubilee journalists set about putting their original idea about how to cover the Jubilee out there. They researched the possibilities of putting their idea into practice and then got told to come up with the goods. They were sent out to various places to record little bits and bobs which would come together to make their whole package. We all worked together doing our own little bit in this project, which made it come together a lot faster. Some of us wanted to put our ideas into film, finding people who have something to say about the Jubilee. This film was made by Kieran to show people just what little treasures some people have.
Mugs, tea towels, biscuit tins, even soaps. What is with this obsession with royal memorabilia? Every time there's a royal occasion, thousands of people rush to the shops to get the Queen's mug on a mug. I will be looking at what is available for this year's Jubilee and throughout history, what is popular these days, and how has the value of vintage items and antiques held up until now. To celebrate the Jubilee, the shops of Norwich are flooded in British flags, painting the streets in red, white and blue. Everyone is cashing in on the Queen. But how does what's selling now compare to that of days gone by? Just wandering around the streets of Norwich, I've found a mass of collector's items from the past, from stamps and china sets to a whole record collection. From older days, I've found a music sheet for the community to join in the celebration of royalty. Why is this all so popular?
I think people have always been interested in royalty. I remember as a kid, I used to collect all scrapbooks of different things from the Queen. So, and I come from a very poor family anyhow, but that was just one of the things we used to do.
I think we've always collected certain things because they are part of our history, our lives, and it's rather nice to keep. It's rather like we keep all our childhood books for a long, long while, don't we? It's the same kind of thing, and I'm sure people want to support the Queen and support the things that are going on this year, especially with the Olympics this year as well. It's all part and parcel of being very patriotic, I suppose.
I wanted to find out even more about memorabilia from the past to the present. So, I talked to Helen Leith, the organiser of the Cloisters Fair and the original Norwich Antiques Fair, held in St Andrew's Hall.
Well, we're at the Norwich Original Flea Market today, and being Royal Jubilee year, we've managed to collect together lots of lovely items from the stallholders here, and we've put them together in a little display to demonstrate sort of royal memorabilia down through the ages, really. We've got a lovely print of Queen Victoria's Jubilee in 1897, so that was her Diamond Jubilee, right through to the present Queen's Diamond Jubilee. This is a very nice piece. This is a medal that was issued to about 100,000 people in 1953, which sounds a tremendous amount, but it was issued to people, for example, the troops who would have lined the procession on the day. It issued to all sorts of dignitaries and people who were involved in the organisation of the coronation up and down the country. So it was a sort of thank you, really. And a few of these pieces, because the successful climbing of Mount Everest was announced on the morning of the coronation. Anybody involved with the Everest expedition had one with their name engraved on them, and they're very valuable. And if you come across one of those are worth about £1,000, whereas these unnamed ones are worth probably about a tenner, something like that. This is a nice piece. This has a local connection. This is not actually for the coronation, but this was for the Silver Jubilee in 1977, and it's from a local pottery. It's from Holcombe Pottery up on the North Norfolk coast, and as you can see, it's very much in the 70s style, that sort of luscious black brown glaze. It absolutely screams 1970s at you, doesn't it? Well, as part of this, I went shopping yesterday and I picked up a couple of pieces which are commemorating this year's Diamond Jubilee. For example, this biscuit tin, which I think is a lovely modern funky design. It's by a well-known local designer, Emma Bridgewater, who's got a strong Norfolk connection, and I think that's a really lovely item. And this is a beautiful piece in silk, which I think definitely is a collectible of the future. It's beautiful design, it's lovely quality, and I think this will become as collectible as, say, Emma's scarf in the future.
Memorabilia is so popular that in Baconsthorpe, an exhibition of rare items has been organised. I spoke to Teresa Courtard, who is the owner of 2 original chairs from the coronation.
My family lived near Baconsthorpe, and I was brought up here, near here, and so the chairs have always been in my home, and we were not allowed to rag about and sit on them, and they were always at the top of the stairs, and it's interesting that one of them has faded much more than other, because I think the light coming in from a big window on the stairs has gone onto one much more than the other. But they've always been in my home, and it's rather fun now that they sort of come back to the middle of celebration of what they were originally used.
After the coronation, her parents and the other guests were allowed to purchase the chairs they sat on. Not only was this a way to make some money, but the chairs themselves became family treasures. She also has a rare guards uniform that was acquired in a similar way. To conclude, I think people collect memorabilia because they love the Queen. It is our way of showing support to the woman who's ruled our country for the past 60 years in our own personal way.
Our films explored a lot of different aspects of the Queen's reign. The Queen is known for visiting lots of places, whether that's to open a new building or to support a charity. This film was made by our reporter Becky, which focused on finding out all about the Queen's visits to Norwich.
Hi, my name's Becky. Over her 60-year reign, the Queen's visited Norfolk many times, including coming to places like this, the Forum in Norwich. I'm going to be talking to people who remember these visits, as well as some people that have even met her.
First of all, I met with Heather Guthrie, Exhibitions Officer at Norwich Castle Museum, who shared with me some pictures of the Queen taken by the royal photographer Cecil Beaton. These portraits capture her image through the decades and gave an interesting insight into the Queen's personality and character as part of their summer exhibition.
Norwich Castle Museum is a perfect venue for this exhibition in that we have this regional connection with Sandringham House, and we know that there is already audience in this region for an exhibition that relates to the Queen and indeed to the royal family. The Queen looks as though she is a normal woman. The Queen is shown in a very simple pose. She's shown here in all her full sense of majesty, wearing the state crown, holding the orb and sceptre, but she's in a very informal moment. He's asked her to smile. It's almost as though for a split second she's suddenly broken into a more relaxed moment. And Cecil Beaton has really set up this beautifully intimate scene between mother and child. We can almost forget that this is the Queen that we're looking at. It could just be any other mother with her first newborn child. He wants to tell us that the Queen is just like you and me.
Later on, I'm going to be meeting a man from the Norfolk Club. But first up, I met a local lady called Linda Bounton, who remembers seeing the Queen on these very steps outside City Hall 40 years ago.
Well, I remember the Queen making an official visit to Norwich in 1968. I think it was in the spring. It was certainly a lovely sunny day. And I remember seeing her on the steps of City Hall. And there were lots of people standing, cheering and waving and welcoming her. And in the afternoon, she made an official visit to UEA.
This, the 1953 East Coast floods when the Queen came to Norfolk. I remember well, I was a little boy, just under 4 years old. Oh, she's delightful and shines radiance and friendship and very approachable and charming and all that we could expect in a fine monarch.
The Queen has travelled all over Norfolk, which is what brings us here to Thetford, where she came in 1993. Let's find out a little bit more about what happened.
Well, my name's Ray Key. I've been mayor twice of this town. My late wife was also mayor, and it was during her mayoralty that we met the Queen when she came to Thetford. It was a once-in-a-lifetime occasion. Very relaxed person, except that she's got this regal glow, you might say.
Well, I'm Colin Arms, former mayor of Thetford twice, former chairman of Brecon District Council, and a real Thetfordian.
Current mayor, born in Thetford. Clearly a great occasion. The only other royal visit we'd had was her predecessor, Elizabeth I.
It wasn't festivities as such, it was just the fact that this one lady, the wonderful lady, our Queen, was in Thetford, and the joy that that brought to the people of Thetford was unbelievable. I mean, the feeling was electric at the time and so exciting. I mean, people had looked forward to this for weeks beforehand. I think that the people of Thetford were very, very proud to think that their monarch was visiting our, what is a comparatively small town. I shall never forget the day anyhow, it was wonderful.
That was in 1993, but the Queen came to Norfolk very recently when she opened the new hostelry at Norwich Cathedral in 2010. The Dean was there to greet her, of course. I went to chat to him to find out all about it.
Well, it was a great day for us because we'd been working for years and years and years to raise huge sums of money. It was almost £13 million we had to find in the end to put up these two wonderful new buildings at Norwich Cathedral. And the Queen came to open them both in May 2010. So you can imagine that this was a very, very big event for us. And people came in their hundreds to see the event going on and to be part of the celebration. She came for a service which lasted about 40 minutes in the cathedral, and then it was a great thrill for us because she came and had lunch with us here in the deanery, so we were very excited about that.
So how did you feel having lunch with the Queen?
A little bit nervous, if I'm honest, but it was a lovely occasion, absolutely lovely, and she clearly was enjoying every moment of it. And in fact, we overran. Of course, you probably know when you have a royal visit, it's all timed down to the last second. But she lingered over lunch. In fact, there was a nice moment when the Duke was tapping his watch to say, "Come on, it's time to go." And she was just saying, "No, I'm not ready to go yet." We like to think, of course, in Norfolk that Norfolk is her favourite county. We like to think that because of Sandringham, and she indeed clearly has a great affection for the county. So there is a sense that, not that she said it, but we felt that there was a sense that this is one of her favourite cathedrals and it was like coming home.
From speaking to people across the county, it seems that the people of Norfolk feel a fond connection with our monarch. Whether it was catching a glimpse of her across a swarm of people waving Union Jacks, or the privilege of meeting her one-to-one, the Queen is a lady that's not easily forgotten. All of us came up with completely different ideas about what we wanted to film, and Fran decided to discover all about how people who have moved to England from different countries feel about the Jubilee.
I'm Fran, one of the Jubilee journalists. Norfolk is a multiracial county, and I wanted to see if the Queen's Diamond Jubilee celebrations touched all communities and can bring us together. Not everyone is keen to celebrate. I went to the tea house on Elm Hill to speak to Tatiana, a lectrice from France, and Adrian, a Canadian call centre worker.
No, I won't be celebrating the Queen's Jubilee. I couldn't care less, I think. I think it's just an excuse to drive people away from the real problems of the country and just, panem et circenses, the usual Roman saying. You give bread and games to the people and they don't bother you and they don't focus on real problems.
I probably won't be doing anything to celebrate the Jubilee per se, but then again I think if I was British I probably wouldn't be either, to be honest. I'm from Canada, so there are celebrations for it over there as well, but no one really seems to make a big deal about it. It's just sort of seen as an impersonal kind of thing, really. I don't think there's much emotional attachment to it, to be honest.
Many businesses have chosen to put on Jubilee specials. I spoke to Dorota, a team leader from Poland at Cafe Pure at the Norfolk and Norwich University Hospital.
Our lovely team decided to, so we are just doing some things to celebrate. Making scones, very British, with cream and jam and strawberries. Yeah, people love them.
One woman really getting into the Jubilee spirit is Ibi Danielle, who first came to the UK as a student from Nigeria and has since settled here after a period in the US. She wants to celebrate the country that's given her a meaningful independent adult life and the safety to raise her family. I met her at her Long Stratton home.
I'm preparing for dinner, African dish, jollof rice, plantain with gravy, vegetable, then with chicken. Growing up, I've seen my mom actually tie the Queen's, there's a wrapper printed in the Queen's head, just from the shoulder up. And my mom really cherished that particular wrapper. It's torn because over the years, this was way before I was born, but I met this wrapper with her and I used to ask a lot of questions, So when this Diamond Jubilee was coming up, and I remembered very quickly that I used to ask a lot of questions about the Queen, England, and I said, one day I have to be in England,
As part of the Jubilee celebrations in Poringland, Ibi dressed up Father Mark Hackerson in traditional Nigerian clothes.
These are our outfits. We use this to actually, during wedding, chieftaincy, if a great grandmother or someone very, special dies.
For some people it's been a fantastic weekend of celebrations, and for others it's been just a few extra days off. It seems opinions have been divided here in Norfolk, just as they have been across the country.
With some of the reports and films coming together nicely, our journalists carried on doing their thing and making their films. In Flo's film, she decided to capture how fashion has changed since the Queen's coronation 60 years ago and how she sometimes follows the trends, but also sticks to what she knows.
Things which I have here before promised, I will perform and keep, so help me God.
It is 1953 and Britain has a new monarch. Elizabeth II is beautiful but very young, and the leader of a country emerging from the hardships of World War II, in need of stability and a strong leader. The whole world is watching her, and so for the new Queen, presentation is everything. Fast forward to 2012, the year of Her Majesty's Diamond Jubilee, and the Queen remains prominent in the public eye. She has watched fashion change from micro-skirts to maxi dresses, shoulder pads to ponchos, all while retaining a sense of classic British style. I'm Flo Page, and as part of the Jubilee Journalist Project, I'm going to be looking at the way in which popular fashion has changed since 1953, and how this was reflected by the outfits worn by the Queen. I've come to the Costume and Textiles Study Centre in Norwich to speak to Ruth Battersby-Took about British style since the 50s and how this has affected Her Majesty Elizabeth II. Earlier in the week I had visited my friend's grandma, who used to be a costume designer for various theatres in Norwich, and I've also been to Goldfinch's, a vintage shop, to get footage of some outfits from each decade. I tried to find things that were typical of the decade they are from, as well as clothes that may have been a similar style to what the Queen would have worn. The Costumes and Textiles Study Centre is home to thousands of items of clothing, and Ruth has kindly got out some key pieces which really emphasise the trends of each decade.
Okay, well we can see in this one you've got polka dots both in the dress of the red dress and also in what the Queen's wearing as well, and polka dots were very kind of key fashion statement of the 1950s, and when we think about the 50s now we do sort of see a polka dot dress really, and they both have the same kind of cut, so you have a full skirt which goes to accentuate a smaller waist, and they also have these kind of sloping shoulders which are probably I can't quite see from the images but maybe caused by having a raglan sleeve sort of cut in, and that just accentuates a slightly demure and very feminine outline there, and they are both quite high on the neck and things, so that shows just the general being covered up, and they are quite ladylike. This one you can see here, you've got this little collar that goes over. The collar is cut in such a way to actually bring the shoulder line down, but still maintain quite a high décolleté. So you can see this one is this pleating on here, because you've got little sort of knife pleats going through. That I think when we were looking at some of the images of Marilyn Monroe, that whole knife pleat again makes movement and it creates more of a shape, but without bringing too much bulk in at the waist. So that's how that works particularly well. And the one of the Queen there, looking quite glamorous actually, with her shoulders out and everything. But again, you can see it's quite high there, and it's got a bit of a sweetheart neckline as well, which kind of looks quite demure, and is one of those key 1950s looks that you get is the sweetheart neckline. So it shows a little bit, but without being too. These kind of bridesmaid dresses are very typical of actually 1950s evening wear. So you've got a heavy silk satin, and you've got it sleeveless, which would be to sort of, that is the way evening gowns are actually constructed. But this one looks, it looks like it's in quite organdy, very light, and full of lots of movement there. But I mean that's quite a classic, and I mean again it's just formal dress rather than actually being fashionable in a way. So although you can see fashionable elements to it, like the full skirtedness, because it's formal, it tends to sort of have more features of formal evening wear rather than anything particularly fashionable. This effect here we see quite a lot in the late 1950s, where you have a net that goes over, or kind of in this case it's a kind of crochet, but you see here that she's actually has changed with the times, if you like, towards the late 1950s, moving away from a full skirt to quite a pencil skirt there, and having this, which is actually it's strapless underneath but has this over the top, the kind of heavy crochet. We see that quite a lot in the 1950s, and it's kind of a good day look. You wouldn't get that.
It's sort of come back now. That's what I thought when I saw this, and the top of this one could quite easily be like
and this is kind of as you've quite rightly said, this is probably early 60s, and this look just carries on over, but it does look very different in that it's not all the way through the dress, it's just stopped here, so getting towards what we see in the 1960s as being a higher waistline, and also you've got little cap sleeves there, as opposed to for an evening dress being no sleeved, and also that colour is very
shocking pink, lovely. Apparently, and very typical. Yes, that's what I've been told.
But in general, I think this is a trend towards more childlike looks in fashion in the 1960s. So what you have here is you've got a high waistline. You tell me that it's a short kind of mini dress. It's all covered across here, so again quite demure, but this kind of playful collar that comes down. You get a lot of Peter Pan collars, and it is incredibly similar to children's sort of toddlers dresses from the 1930s through to the 1950s in terms of the colour, the pattern that goes through here, and just in general this sort of smock type shape.
Anna looks like she's going to school when she had it on.
She's a lot younger than she does in the other images. adopted, you know, the classic shape that suits her, and she's kind of sticking with that.
Yeah.
But she has shown a little bit of an interesting fashion in terms of using quite a splashy floral print on there. But you know, in marked contrast to this, where the shape and the construction of it is so extreme.
Yeah.
Big sleeves, very long and flowing. You don't really tend to see the Queen after, you know, out of evening wear anyway, wearing anything that's kind of longer than just below the knee.
Yeah.
So she doesn't really go with fashion in terms of the changing hemlines and that kind of vagaries of fashion of, you know, things going up and down and sleeves getting bigger and smaller. By this stage, she's got her neat look and she's sticking with it, but she will, you know, give a nod to what's going on around, but not too much.
This dress is from the 1980s. Yes. It had massive shoulder pads.
Definitely. And a lot is going on in the sleeves here. I can't quite see from the image, but there's a lot of kind of applied fabric decoration on there, which really does accentuate the large shoulders. I think as an experiment, it probably doesn't work brilliantly for the Queen. But again, because she's not kind of, you know, taken into consideration anything and changed